Welcome to the Power and Light podcast. My name is Josiah Winnell, and I am alongside Preston Graber and Jude Miley today. Preston, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Good to be back. Good to have another episode coming out.
And Jude Miley.
Oh, hello guys. I am happy to see you today.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while for us to talk together, but it's good to be back. And you might be wondering why it's been a while. Well, just be patient. You'll see. If you follow us on Instagram, you can start to see some new stuff. There might be some new things coming into place starting this March or April. But right now, the Kansas City Chiefs are in the Final Four, essentially. So we kind of have to talk about it. The Chiefs will be taking on the Ravens at Baltimore. The Chiefs are in their sixth straight AFC Championship game, but this time the streak ends, so this time they will be at Baltimore. First thoughts, Preston Graber. What is the first things, the biggest thing that stands out to you as the Ravens are the favorite?
The weather and the injuries, I think, are going to be two of the biggest factors. So, depending on how the Chiefs handle the weather, how their game plan's looking on offense, because I think both defenses equal out pretty good. So, I think it's going to come down to the offensive play.
Offensive play is definitely important, and there's two great offensive quarterbacks. We got Patrick Mahomes on one side, who essentially is the best quarterback in football. It can be debated, but I think all of us believe that he is the best. But then on the other side, you have Lamar Jackson. And Jude, you've always been a huge fan of Lamar. Can you tell us what is so special about him?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. So Lamar Jackson, he's got this talent to him. You know, a lot of quarterbacks have talent, but he's got this special talent. He can run by guys. He can get out of the way. He can do whatever he wants because he's Lamar. And you've seen the video of him going to his left, going to his right. And the thing about Lamar Jackson is he just can do stuff. He can make stuff up, right? He can get out of there. He can squirm out of there. He can go score touchdowns, right? So that's what kind of sets him apart from Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is a better, like, pure passer. But the way I see it is Lamar Jackson he's just got a special talent to him.
So, Jude, on 3rd and 10, because this Lamar's strong suit is definitely running the ball. But on 3rd and 10, if you're the coach of the Ravens, do you want him running the ball or do you want him passing the ball? What do you trust more in a scenario like that?
I think he should hand it off. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I think personally, I think Lamar Jackson should pass the ball because he can pass the ball, right? He has an arm, right?
Yeah, he does. He definitely has improved that. He spent a ton of time improving that part of him. He said at the beginning of the season, he said with this wide receiver group, he said he could get to 6,000 yards. Now, he didn't, obviously, and this wide receiver group is not nearly as good as he thought or maybe people thought in general. But the big thing is just he has a good wide receiver group, something that Patrick Mahomes has not had the luxury of having this year. Preston, I want to go back to you. You mentioned the weather. On Sunday, it's gonna be not super cold compared to that game against all the way back against in the wild card matchup against the Dolphins, but it is going to be a little bit rainy. How do you think the rain will affect the game?
Well, I think it just means the game will be more on the ground, and we've seen the Chiefs be fine on the ground using Pacheco. I mean, he obviously has had his big games this year where he goes for over 100 yards, which is really good. The Chiefs have only had to play in the rain a few times this year. Their defense in the rain is a bit slower, and you can tell the difference there. So that's a bit worrisome since the Ravens are really quick on the ground. They've got Zay Flowers, Odell, they do jet sweeps too, and then they have Gus Edwards, who's more of a pound back up the middle, and then Lamar obviously can really beat you anywhere. So it's a bit worrisome seeing how the rain will make it more of a ground game, and we really want Lamar throwing because his legs are the more scary part of it even though he's a really good passer too.
It'll be interesting to see what two of the best defenses in the entire nation and the entire NFL showing off against each other. And honestly, obviously, the Chiefs are 2 and 3 in a lot of statistics, but the Ravens lead in a lot of those stats. One of the stats they don't lead in, they are 16th against rush defense. So something that the Chiefs would love to do is run the ball with Isaiah Pacheco, but that may not be possible as he is dealing with an ankle/toe injury. He did not practice at all this week until Friday, yesterday, and it was a limited practice. So if he goes, it's great, but he is definitely going to be hampered by that injury. Jude, how much of an impact do you think Isaiah Pacheco being injured is on this running game?
I think it is a blow because he is a good running back, but I do think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good substitute. I think he's got this spark to him. He can get big plays, and also I think people are forgetting about Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Now I'm not saying he's going to run the ball, but Hail Mary, that's a game-winning touchdown right there.
I wish I could play that clip of Jude just like a couple weeks ago saying cut him. So
Oh,
okay, all right. And then Jude, I have another injury question for you. Our backup quarterback, Blaine Gabbert's dealing with an oblique injury. He practiced most of this week. How big of an impact is that?
I don't think it's going to impact anything. But why does he get injured, bro? What is he doing at practice?
I don't know. All right, but more serious note, looking at some of the bigger injuries, Derek Nottie at the nose tackle position will not be playing. He is officially out. And that's going to be a big blow because that means that we have to go farther into our depth at the defensive tackle position. Obviously, you have Chris Jones, who is elite, but then after that, it's kind of a drop off especially after Nottie. Now, the other person that is officially out, there's two actually, Sky Moore, the wide receiver, and he's had some big games in the playoffs, especially last year in the Super Bowl. So it would if the Chiefs were to win, we'd love to have him back, but he is out for the AFC Championship alongside Joe Thuney, who is out. That is probably the biggest loss of all of these guys. He is one of our guards, and he is an all-pro guard, which means he is the best guard in football at his position. And that is a huge blow. Now, there is some good news that came out from Ian Rappaport that if the Chiefs were to win and head to the Super Bowl, 2 weeks would be plenty of time, we think, for him to come back and play. But we've seen offensive linemen in Chiefs postseason start to fall like flies, and it turns out horribly for the Chiefs. We saw that most recently in the Super Bowl against the Bucs. All right, so Jude, looking at this receiver group, you've got Sky Moore that's out, and you've got some guys that really can't catch the ball on a consistent basis. If there is let's go back to that 3rd and 10 scenario. Who do you want catching the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hands?
Now, I think the obvious answer is Rashee Rice. Now, he's had some drops, but he's also probably been the best receiver on the Chiefs. At least in the past, let's say the second half of the season, he's gotten better as he's gone on, right? So I would pass it to Rashee Rice, or Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You could catch him, playing a little bit close, stop the first down. He's open for a touchdown.
All right, Preston. And then our last thing, not necessarily injury-wise, but our last thing on the Chiefs' defensive backfield, L'Jarius Sneed has been locked down all year. It's shocking to me that he did not get the Pro Bowl nod, but he hadn't allowed a touchdown all year until last week to Kahil Shahir. I think that's his name, right? But how big of an impact, even though he's dealing with a calf injury and he's limited at practice, he was able to go last week when he was also limited. How big is it for him to be able to play?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's big for him to play. He's arguably one of the top 5 cornerbacks in football. He doesn't get the credit he deserves. He held basically every number 1 receiver that we played under 50 yards. But he's been dealing with this calf injury for the last 6 to 8 weeks, and he's battled through it every time. So unless it just got that much worse because of something. Now the rain and the wet turf will be a bit worrisome. He might have to come out a bit more, but I'm not that worried about it because he'll play some. But Joshua Williams has been really, really good. He has played 122 snaps and he's got only 12 targets at him, and he's only allowed 1 reception for 7 yards over his last 4 games. So he's had the time in the system, and I think he's going to be good. People thought Jalen Watson would be there, but it's been Joshua Williams, and he's been extremely good on the other side.
Yeah, the 4th-round draft pick from last year. It's important to note that the Ravens, yes, they only have 5 on their injury report, and the Chiefs have double digits. But at the same time, the Ravens' injuries are slightly different. The biggest addition this week is Mark Andrews. The tight end will be returning. Jude, Mark Andrews was a huge part of your fantasy team. How big is he for the Ravens?
He is like Travis Kelce, but he's, he can catch a Hail Mary, he can catch a short pass, he can push a ball into the ground. So Mark Andrews is kind of like the second best tight end in the NFL, right? And that's big, right? So to get someone like him back on your team provides this whole new opportunity because they haven't had that same reliability out of anybody. But now that you've got Mark Andrews catching balls, Lamar doesn't even have to throw it accurate, right? Mark Andrews is going to grab it.
Yeah, he definitely is a huge impact. Yeah, I would say he's the best ball catcher on that team. And then I don't want to dwell on injuries, but we've covered pretty much all of them. The only other thing I'll say is either team, if they win, will get the full 2 weeks to get healthy. And we've seen the Chiefs take advantage of that in their 3 Super Bowls, their 3 Mahomes Super Bowls, in which they had a bunch of injured players going out of the AFC Championship, but they had just enough time to get them healthy before the big game. All right, Preston, the odds right now is -4 on Baltimore. That means the odds makers think that the Baltimore will win by 4. ESPN Analytics has the Ravens with a 63.6% chance to win. Do you think this is accurate or disrespectful?
Well, the line started at 3, and then it went back to 3.5 mid last week, and now it's up to 4. So I think that's mostly because the Tooney news broke and the Mark Andrews news broke, but also because the Chiefs are saying Willie Gay is injured and his neck isn't able to turn. So he won't be able to contain Lamar, and he's been our QB spy the past few weeks because he's fast. So not having him in all on 100% of downs, he said he'd probably pay 50%, I think, but there's not that there. So I think that's what moved the line a lot. I think it's accurate based on that. You just The Chiefs are a big unknown when it comes to point spreads because they win a lot when Mahomes is an underdog. I think they're like 15-0 when he's been an underdog, and he's only been an underdog like 15 times. So they're pretty good. But it's just like the analytics of the 62%, I really think it's just a 50-50 game. Whoever plays the better game that game. Like you're not going to know till it comes to that point.
Yeah, there's a reason that the Baltimore Ravens are number 1 seed coming into these playoffs out of a very strong AFC. It's because Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP level. But it's just when you look at the history, I mean, Patrick Mahomes has more passing touchdowns in the playoffs in his 6 seasons, his 6 real seasons, than the Baltimore Ravens have in their history of their franchise. He also has played in the same amount of games as the Arizona Cardinals. Like he is just the Chiefs team. Kansas City Chiefs are built for January and February, and I don't think analysts at least are being very respectful of that, or I guess I don't think they're acknowledging that. All right, Jude, I have to ask. The lowest tickets for this game are just under $640. I think Baltimore Ravens fans, yes, obviously they probably bought all the tickets, but I think Ravens and Chiefs fans, the ones that will travel there, realize this is going to be a good game. What's the chance of this being a classic NFL game?
Yeah, I've been looking at it for a while and I've been thinking, and I saw this idea out of the stretching of my mind and my brain. I grabbed this and I said 0% chance. This is gonna be a terrible game. It's gonna be a blowout. The Ravens, something's gonna happen to their Achilles before the game. I think I saw that in my brain, but the Chiefs are just gonna walk on these boys. It's not even gonna be close.
All right. Jude giving us a little bit of a preview of his picks. I think one of the big things that you have to look at is that Pittsburgh, right before in week 18, I understand that the Ravens did not have their starters in there, but they lost to Pittsburgh at home 17-10. How much of that game tape do you look at, or do you look at it at all because of the no starters, Preston?
I don't think it plays that much of a factor. Anytime Lamar's not on the field, the team's downgraded. So the fact that they were playing Snoop Huntley, people say, oh, he's like Lamar, but he can't pass the ball like Lamar. Sure, he can run, but if you can't pass the ball, you don't have the RPO options. And the play action isn't as good because obviously on play action, you don't just have the you can hand it off or you can pass it. You also have the Lamar can run. So in reality, they have a three threat offense anytime they do an action fake. So I wouldn't look at that game at all, aside from the fact that their defense somehow allowed 17 points to Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I mean, they also, yeah, no starters is always weird. You can't really use week 18. Used to be week 17, but you really can't use week 18 statistics as much. But I think one of the big things that you have to look at is, yes, this defense is really good, and it has been good for a while. But the acquisition that they got was Roquan Smith last year. They got him from the Bears last year for, I believe, 2 first-rounders, and that was just, I think that was the turning point for this Ravens franchise. I don't I don't think they're as good as people say, but I also respect them that they are the number 1 seed. I think going into these offseason, people were saying this is one of the best AFC fields we've ever seen. Now, obviously, quarterback injuries has hampered that, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see what it looks like next year, regardless of who wins this game. All right, Preston, Detroit and San Francisco, the NFC Championship with the nightcap of the game. San Francisco with just under 75% chance to win, according to ESPN. That's ridiculous, in my opinion, for a NFC Championship. Why are there so many doubters on the Lions?
Well, obviously, I'm a big Lions fan, so I don't have the doubt. But listening to the national media, it's like people just don't see a way that the Niners defense can't hold them under 30, and they don't see a way that the Niners offense doesn't put up 30. So it's kind of that swing at there. But it is a 7-point spread in favor of the Niners, so that's extremely high in my opinion. I don't think the Lions can like all the games the Lions have played have been close. They haven't had blowouts either way. Most of their wins have been close wins, except for 1 week they got destroyed by the Ravens, sorry. But I mean, yes, the Niners are good, but in reality, Brock Purdy hasn't looked that great. He has been decent, he's been mediocre, but Christian McCaffrey's the reason they're winning games. So if the Lions can shut down Christian McCaffrey, I think the Lions win easy.
Yeah, ever since that loss to the Ravens, the 49ers with Brock Purdy going to that game was an MVP candidate and kind of has been a little bit rattled, I guess, since then. All right, Jude, this is the first game the Lions will play outdoors in multiple months. This is a storyline for some people, and some people say, does it even matter? But Jared Goff does play better indoors. Obviously, the Lions Stadium is indoors, and they've been playing indoors for the last couple months. Jude, how big of an impact is it for the Lions heading to Levi Stadium, which is an outdoor stadium in California?
I don't think that's a huge deal. Jared Goff, you know who he played for? Los Angeles Rams. If I remember correctly, that's in California. So what I'm
You were
thinking,
right.
yeah, I'm thinking he'll be used to the California weather. Now I don't know how cold it is in California, but I think he'll be used to it. He you know, never mind, bro, I'm yapping. But I do think he's gonna be fine here.
Okay, but Jude, I don't think it's necessarily one side or the other, whether it's more about, I think, offensive execution. Obviously, Deebo Samuel will return for the 49ers, which is a huge impact for that San Francisco team. But Preston mentioned it just a moment ago. Christian McCaffrey, who I believe should be the MVP, not Lamar Jackson, but just because he's got just under a 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns, that's ridiculous that's just ridiculous for a player that is not, I know he's not really a running back. He's more of like he's changing the position like Travis Kelce did with the tight end position. But talk about how big CMC is for this 49ers team.
So let me tell you something. I believe that the 49ers are the better team beyond any no shade of doubt, no line of uncertainty. The 49ers are simply better, right? And Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the past 5 years. So the way I see it, Christian McCaffrey steps on the Lions. Debo Samuel outruns the Lions. Brandon Ayuk, you don't need him. But the only the only issue with the 49ers is the man himself, Brock Purdy, right? And so what you have to understand is the Lions have a bad not a yeah, I would say bad defense. What were they, 23rd in points allowed? So I don't think they're going to be able to stop anybody, right? And the 49ers are simply better than the Lions. And the only way they lose is if half their team gets injured again.
Which is definitely a possibility based off last year. Jude, you sound like you're giving your early predictions, at least a preview of them. We'll get to those a little bit later. Preston, we've already kind of talked about big picture, but both of these teams came to the playoffs 12-5, and they've obviously they've had a big win or two to get here. What I guess the biggest question is what is on stake? What is at stake for both teams? Obviously, the 49ers haven't been able to get past this NFC Championship with the exception of the Super Bowl that they lost to the Chiefs a few years ago. And the Lions, this is the first time in 30 years that they've been in the playoffs. So talk about how big the stakes are in this matchup.
Yeah, well, I'll start with Detroit. Obviously the stakes for them are quite higher. The Detroit fan base has bought in completely to what Dan Campbell has done up there and are just fully dedicated. And Dan Campbell's done a great job. Everyone questioned his draft picks, but Jameer Gibbs looks like the next Christian McCaffrey once he gets that full 100% touches. So that will be something to look at. And the signing of David Montgomery was a good play by him because Gibbs got hurt for that little period. So Campbell's been making moves and the Detroit fan base has been on board. And I think that if they do make it to the Super Bowl, it will just be like an eye opening for the whole sports world that you can go from a bottom five team to a top five team within a 2 to 3 year window. Like there doesn't have to be the big transition because obviously the Lions were terrible for quite a long time. I liked the Lions when they were bad, because they were bad. Uh but then like the Niners, they've been here, they've done this. The Niners organization has been a winning organization for a long time. They've had Rice, Montana, Steve Young. Like they've had these opportunities to get to the Super Bowl. Just not what the Lions have had. The Lions have had nothing. They're exact opposite scenarios in my opinion. So I think that it would be much bigger for the Lions and the fans of Detroit if they can make it.
Yeah, definitely completely different histories. Jude, Preston just mentioned it right there. You've got Jameer Gibbs, who was a questionable draft pick. As me and Preston were there on draft night, I think there was boos from Lions fans a little bit for Jameer Gibbs, but especially for when Jack Campbell was drafted. I think both of those picks have been good picks, but the specialty, the best part of the Lions draft came in the later rounds, in which they got players like Sam Laporta and Brian Branch. Obviously, some of those they've dealt with injuries, both of those players, but this has been a good team throughout the year. But Jude, he just mentioned it right there, Jameer Gibbs, and then he's got his counterpart David Montgomery. I think you're a fan or something of David Montgomery. How big of an impact is he on this NFC game?
Now, the thing about David Montgomery, like he is my boy, but the issue with him is he's simply not as powerful as other running backs. And I believe in the potential of the team and what they can do in the running game. They have a solid running game, better than the Chiefs, right? So I think David Montgomery makes a big impact. but he's not as good. He just has this limit, it seems, compared to other guys. So he is a big impact, but he's not a game changer.
Okay, so he's kind of in that second tier, not the top tier. Preston, the Lions defensive end Aiden Hutchinson, he was the first overall pick just a year, I guess 2 years now ago. And that was kind of a questionable pick. Excuse me, he was the second overall pick. People thought he would go number one, but he slipped after the Jags took a different defensive end. So, but he's been a huge pick for them. I mean, he is just an absolute baller, but he is facing the 49ers right tackle, Colton Mikovits. Now, the thing is, the 49ers have one of the best tackles in all of football on the other side at left tackle. But this guy, he's not as good at all. He's definitely the weak link in this offensive line. Now, it's been Aiden Hutchinson's show throughout the last 2 games, and he has 8 sacks in the last 4 of his games. So that's averaging 2 a game. How big do you think he will be on this defensive side for the Lions?
Oh yeah, I mean he'll play a big role. The whole D line of the Lions will play a big role, obviously. Um, Trent Williams is a really good O line, but then you see people you haven't heard names of for the rest of the Niners line: Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Spencer Burford, and then Colton Mikovits. When last year they had pretty much all names we knew on the O line with Joe Staley, Trent Williams, and then some others on the inside. But obviously, the tackles are the 2 largest positions. So it's a bit different for Purdy. And I think we've seen him struggle because he's been sacked a lot. And in that Ravens game, he was getting absolutely pressured like nonstop. So I think Hutchinson will be a game wrecker this game, especially if he's going up against Mikshovitz. So it will be interesting, but I definitely think he'll have at least a sack and he'll have a ton of pressures.
Yeah, I mean, because of that offensive line, he went down last year when Hassan Reddick ran right through there and took out his UCL. Now, I think 49ers fans believe that if they had the rule right now that they do, where you can have one more quarterback, I think the 49ers would think that they would have been in the Super Bowl last year. So I think they know that they're close, and I think they're motivated going into this game. Obviously, we've talked about it all year, how much talent is on that offensive side. But I believe it's going to be a great game. We'll get to our picks in just a little bit. I want to give a little bit of an update on what's going on. Not really an update. I'm just trying to keep secrets. But like I mentioned earlier, sometime in March or April, we're going to be starting a new series, and I think you guys will really enjoy it. But you got to stay tuned on Instagram and or YouTube, and you can check us out. Check out what's going on. I think it's going to be a fun 2024. But first, we got to focus on Kansas City Chiefs hopefully getting all the way to the Super Bowl and possibly winning it. Last thing I want to ask before we get to the picks is Chiefs Bills, looking back to last week, how much does this hurt? I'll start with Jude. How much does this hurt Josh Allen's legacy and his consistent losing? He's been eliminated 3 of the last 4 seasons by Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think Josh Allen is going to be one of those guys that's like, kind of laughed at in the quarterback community. Like, he's okay, but he really can't make it anywhere, right? He's got this ceiling to him that he can't get past this round, and so I think he's just going to be laughed at constantly for the rest of his life. Hard to make the Hall of Fame when you can't make it to the Super Bowl. And what we should be really asking is how does this affect Stephon Diggs' legacy, right?
Okay. Well, let me ask you, how does it affect Stephon Diggs' legacy?
Oh, okay. Let me tell you how this affects Stephon Diggs' legacy. You remember all those games where he's sitting there at the sidelines watching them celebrate? He feels that. And you could tell if he made it to the Super Bowl, he'd go for 500 yards and 32 touchdowns. But he can't. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. But that's just an expression. But what you got to think is that he's been playing well for so long, and then one begins to wonder if someone paid him to play bad against the Chiefs. I'm not hinting at anything, but I'm just saying that would be that'd be weird if somebody did that. Now, I'm sad for him pretty much. That's all I'm saying. I'm sad for him.
Okay, I'll cut you off there. 500 touchdowns and 500 yards and 32 touchdowns. That is some short touchdowns. I'm gonna try to forget some of what you said, but I do agree that there is an issue in Buffalo, whether that was the offensive coordinator earlier in the year and they switched it, or is it Stephon Diggs or Josh Allen? Josh Allen they're coming into this season as the MVP favorite, but you don't get the award just for being the favorite. Preston, it's just one of those things, but there's I guess, stat out there or an occurrence in which every single team that has ever played Josh Allen and beat him in the playoffs, eliminated him from contention, has lost their next game. How big of an impact is that? I personally don't believe it is, but what is your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing as Kirk Cousins beating an NFC team in the regular season has never gone on to the Super Bowl. It's just a dumb stat. I mean, it you just gotta go one game by one game when it comes to playoff time. I mean, obviously all games aren't going to be the same. All games are going to have different outcomes. So, I mean, Josh Allen's just not that good. He's not that clutch. And so I think teams beating him maybe think they have to put all their effort into beating him. But I think the Chiefs held back a lot of their game plan against the Bills because one, we didn't bring as many blitzes as Josh Allen because the dude never threw a ball past like 15 yards. And two, the Chiefs knew they were going to win. It was like the most relaxed Chiefs fans had ever been for a game that we played Buffalo, and we ended up winning by 3, but we obviously could have won by at least 10.
Jude, if you're the head coach this week, if you're Andy Reid, does McCole Hardman touch the ball at all in this game after touching it twice in the divisional round and fumbling twice?
No, and if I was the head coach, I mean, he really wouldn't even be on the team anymore. Like, there's some things you can't forget about, and that's one of them, right? So, I mean, it happens. Players have a bad game, bad play, but I'd get rid of him now.
Preston, do you disagree?
Yes, I disagree. McCole Hardman has to touch the ball. We don't have that flip pass guy anymore because Tony's just bad. Like, sure, Tony might step foot on the field for one play, but no, we need Hardman. I think Hardman's good. We need to trust him where he's been in Kansas City this long, and the only time he's really messed up is when he dropped that punt in the playoffs and they picked it up and basically returned for a touchdown. But hey, it's good. We gotta trust him. He's our specialties guy. Richie James could touch the ball more in his place, but Richie James isn't McCole Hardman.
Well, McCole Hardman also handed Josh Allen the keys to victory last week. Thankfully for the Chiefs fans, it did not end up that way. All right, it is time for our picks, our weekend picks, January 28th, this Sunday at 5:30 p.m. We'll start with the nightcap. The NFC Championship, the 12-5 Detroit Lions take on the 12-5 San Francisco 49ers. Preston, we'll start with your pick.
I am taking Jared Goff in my Detroit Lions or the 49ers with the score of 34-28.
Okay, Jude Miley.
Yeah, I'm taking the 49ers with a score of 32-7.
Okay, and I will take a little bit of a lower scoring approach, but I will have the 49ers winning 28-24, mostly because I don't want Preston's prediction of a Lions Chiefs Super Bowl to come forward. All right, and the game that we are all going to be completely tuned into, the Chiefs heading to Baltimore for the first time out of Patrick Mahomes' AFC Championships. Mahomes taking on one of the best quarterbacks in football, and Lamar Jackson, the MVP favorite. I guess there's no way to put it. Here's what I want. I want your first up, before you give your pick, what's your over under 44.5? Preston, go quickly, then Jude. 44.5, over or under?
Mine's over.
Jude?
I'll take the under.
Okay, I have to go with the over. I feel like 44.5 is a little bit low. All right, time for our picks. Jude, you go ahead and start us. Baltimore Ravens hosting the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'll take the Chiefs 18-2.
Iowa
Mm.
Hawkeyes. All right. Preston Graber.
Okay. So my stat earlier about Mahomes being an underdog was wrong. He's 8-3 as an underdog, only losing to Tom Brady, Josh Allen, and Jared Goff in the super high scoring game. So I want to see a rematch of Jared Goff and Mahomes in the Super Bowl, a rematch of that 54-51 classic we had. I'm going Chiefs 31, Baltimore 23.
Wow, my prediction's very similar. I'm going to go with the Chiefs 31-21. I think we'll win by double digits because I think that we will be able to exploit this defense. But don't let our predictions let it change for you. It is a very good team, and it's going to be an amazing matchup. We're excited for this weekend. Jude, send us out of this episode with a quote of the day.
The quote of the day is, if you want to know what a man's like, take a good look at how he treats his inferiors, not his equals. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire.